When a man at Tudors Biscuit World in Beckley, West Virginia, saw a boy standing at the condiment counter eating a sausage biscuit, not sitting in a booth, not sitting on a stool, standing at the narrow counter by the napkins and ketchup packets with his tray balanced on the edge, and the boy was eating fast, head down, elbows in, taking up as little space as possible, like standing and eating was something he'd practiced until he'd gotten efficient at it. The man almost didn't say anything. People eat standing up at fast food places. It happens. But then a booth opened up 3 feet from the boy, and the boy looked at it, looked at the empty seat, looked at the table, and turned back to the counter. He chose the counter. He chose standing. The booth was right there, and he chose standing. And the man said, "Booth just opened up, buddy. You want to sit?" And the boy said, without looking at him, "I don't sit at tables. I eat standing up. That's how it is at home, so that's how it is everywhere." Not a preference, not a quirk. A rule that had been installed in a boy so deep it followed him out of the house and into every restaurant and cafeteria and kitchen he walked into. A child who'd been standing while eating for so long that a chair wasn't an option. It was a foreign object. Tudors Biscuit World sat on Harper Road in Beckley, Raleigh County, one of those regional chains that West Virginians treated like a religion and outsiders had never heard of. Sausage biscuits, gravy, sweet tea, and a dining room that was half booths and half tables and full of coal miners and nurses and teachers at 7:30 in the morning. The breakfast rush was a symphony of squeaking vinyl and clinking coffee cups, and the boy was the only person in the building eating on his feet. Webb Lockhart was there because he ate at Tudor's every Saturday before heading to his shop. He was 42 years old, 6 feet 1 inch, 260 pounds, with a dark red beard and hands that had been doing auto body repair for 20 years. He could pull a dent, cut a panel, and lay a bead of filler with the precision of a surgeon. He was Sergeant at Arms of the Raleigh Ridge MC, a 10-member club based out of Beckley that met at Webb's shop on Route 3 and rode the mountain roads every other weekend. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels and hit that notification bell, because this story starts with a boy who wouldn't sit down in a restaurant with 20 empty seats and a man who asked why. Webb set his coffee on the booth table and walked to the condiment counter. The boy was 10, thin but not starving, brown hair that was clean and combed, wearing a red polo shirt tucked into khakis with a belt. He looked put together. That was the thing. He looked like a kid whose parents cared about presentation. The shirt was ironed, the hair was combed, the shoes were polished. Everything on the outside said, "This family has it together." The standing said otherwise. "What's your name?" "Nolan. Nolan Creed." "Nolan, why don't you sit at tables?" "I'm not allowed. At home, the table is for the family. I'm not family. I'm my mom's son from before. Kent, my stepdad. He says the table is for his family. That's him, my mom, and his 2 kids, Bryce and Lainey. They sit at the table. I eat in the kitchen, standing, at the counter by the microwave." "You eat standing at a counter?" "Every meal. Breakfast, lunch if I'm home, dinner. The table seats 4. There are 4 chairs. Kent, Mom, Bryce, Lainey. I'm the 5th person in a 4-chair house. Kent says there's no room. There's room. I've measured. You could fit a 5th chair. I even found one at Goodwill for $4. But he says no. He says the table is set, and the table is full, and the kitchen counter is fine." For a year? 13 months, since Kent moved in. Before Kent it was just me and Mom, and we sat at the table together every night. She cooked, and I set the table, 2 plates, 2 glasses, 2 forks, and we sat across from each other, and she asked about school, and I told her, and that was dinner. Then Kent came, and he brought Bryce and Lainey, and suddenly there were 5 people, and 4 chairs, and somebody had to go, and it was me. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Asphalt Angels. Because a 10-year-old boy had been standing at a kitchen counter for 13 months while 4 people sat at a table 6 feet away, and his mother was one of them. Does your mom know? She's at the table. She sees me standing. She knows. The first time it happened, the first night Kent said, "The table's full, Nolan. Eat at the counter." She looked at me. I saw her look. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, and then she didn't. She closed her mouth, and she picked up her fork and she ate, and I stood at the counter, and that was the first night, and every night since has been the same. She sees me. She just doesn't say anything. She never said anything? Once. About 3 months in, she said to Kent, "Maybe we should get a bigger table." And Kent said, "The table's fine. He's fine. Kids eat at the counter all the time. My buddy's kids eat on the floor." And my mom said, "Okay," and that was it. She traded a chair for okay. She traded my place at the table for not making Kent uncomfortable. And I heard it. I was right there, 6 feet away, eating rice standing up. And I understood. I'm not worth the argument. What do Bryce and Lainey think? Bryce is 9. He thinks it's normal. He's always had a chair, so he doesn't think about who doesn't. Lainey is 6. She asked me once why I don't sit with them, and I said, "There aren't enough chairs." And she said, "Why don't you get one?" And I said, "Your dad says no." And she said, "Oh." That was the whole conversation. She's 6. She accepted it the way 6-year-olds accept weather. It just is. What do you eat at the counter? Whatever they eat. That's the thing. Kent doesn't starve me. He's not that kind of mean. The food is the same. Mom makes dinner, and she plates 4 servings for the table, and she puts mine on a separate plate on the counter. Same food, same amount. But the plate is on the counter, not on the table. And I eat it standing up facing the wall while they eat sitting down facing each other. Same food, different world. If you're watching this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes 1 second, and helps these stories reach the people who need them. Now, back to the story. Has anyone at school noticed? At school I eat in the cafeteria at a table with my friends. That's the only time I sit and eat. Monday through Friday, 11:45 to 12:15. Those 30 minutes are the only time all week I sit at a table with food in front of me. My friend Devin said once, "Nolan, you eat like you're trying to memorize it." He was joking. He wasn't wrong. I eat slow at school because it's the only meal I get to sit for, and I want it to last. Everybody else rushes through lunch to get to recess. I stay until the bell. Mrs. Pennington, she supervises the cafeteria, she says, "Nolan, you don't have to rush." I'm not rushing. I'm staying. There's a difference. Has a teacher ever asked? The school counselor, Mrs. Chen. She noticed I was the last kid out of the cafeteria every day. She asked if everything was okay, and I said I just like the cafeteria. She said, "You like the cafeteria?" And I said, "I like the chairs." She wrote that down. She didn't follow up. I think she thought I was being funny. I wasn't. I like the chairs. They're plastic and they're bolted to the table and they're uncomfortable and they're the best chairs I've ever sat in because they're mine for 30 minutes and nobody can take them away. What about weekends? Weekends are the worst. 3 meals a day, all standing. Saturday and Sunday I eat 9 meals at the counter over the 2 days. By Sunday night my feet hurt. My lower back hurts. I'm 10 years old and my back hurts from standing in a kitchen. I started putting a folded towel on the floor to stand on because the tile is cold and hard and the towel helps a little. Denise saw the towel and she didn't say anything. Kent saw the towel and he said, "What's the towel for?" And I said, "My feet hurt." And he said, Then wear shoes. Not, then sit down. Wear shoes. The solution to standing too long in his mind was better footwear, not a chair. What do you do after dinner on weekends? I go to my room. I sit on my bed. I sit on everything in my room. The bed, the floor, the desk chair, the windowsill. I sit just to sit. My room is the only place in the house where I'm allowed to not be standing. Everywhere else, kitchen, living room, dining room, if Kent's there, I stand or I leave. I've learned which rooms are his and which minutes are mine. The house has a schedule, and I'm not on it. Does it bother you more that you stand or more that they sit? Nolan stopped chewing. He looked at the booth 3 feet away, the empty one he'd chosen not to use. It's not the standing. I can stand. Standing doesn't hurt that much. It's the sitting. It's watching them sit. It's watching my mom pull out her chair and sit down and pick up her fork and not look at me. Every night. She doesn't look at me during dinner. She looks at Kent. She looks at Bryce. She looks at Lainey. She looks at her plate. She never looks at the counter. If she looked at me, she'd have to see what she's allowing. So she doesn't look. I'm 6 feet away, and I'm invisible, and the invisibility is worse than the standing. Webb walked outside. His biscuit was untouched on the booth table. He called 911. This is Webb Lockhart. I'm at Tudors on Harper Road in Beckley. There's a 10-year-old boy named Nolan Creed eating standing up at a counter because his stepfather won't let him sit at the family table. This has been going on for 13 months. The child's mother is present in the home and compliant with the exclusion. The stepfather's name is Kent. Last name unknown. I don't have a home address, but the boy is here right now. I need CPS to talk to this kid. He texted the Raleigh Ridge MC group chat. Tudors on Harper Road. 10-year-old eating standing up. Stepdad banned him from the table. 13 months. Mom watches and says nothing. Need brothers. If Asphalt Angels has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. Now, back to the ending. 2 brothers arrived, Jessup and Poole. Jessup was a tile setter, 5 feet 10 inches, 235, with a gray beard and a level clipped to his belt even on Saturdays. Poole was a CDL driver who hauled gravel and had hands the size of dinner plates. They walked into Tudors, looked at the boy standing at the condiment counter, looked at the 20 empty seats in the dining room, and Jessup said 2 words. Sit down. I eat standing. Not today. Today you sit. Jessup pulled out a chair at the booth. Not the empty booth 3 feet away. The booth where Webb's untouched biscuit was still sitting. The booth that was already occupied. Because the point wasn't an empty seat. The point was sitting with someone. Poole slid into the other side. Webb came back inside and sat next to Poole. 3 grown men in motorcycle vests at a Tudors booth at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, and they pulled out the 4th chair for a 10-year-old boy who hadn't sat at a table in 13 months. Nolan looked at the chair. He looked at the 3 men. He looked at the chair again. His hands were at his sides, and his tray was on the counter, and he was standing the way he always stood. Weight shifted, 1 foot slightly forward, the posture of someone who'd been vertical so long, their body had adapted to it. There's room? There's always been room, buddy. Sit down. Nolan sat. The motion was careful. He didn't drop into the seat the way kids drop into seats. He lowered himself like he was testing the chair, like it might not hold, like permission might be revoked mid-sit. He put his tray on the table. He looked at the tray on the table, the tray that was always on a counter, that was always at standing height, that was always facing a wall. Now it was on a table facing 3 men who were looking at him, not past him, not through him, at him. He picked up his biscuit, and he ate it sitting down. And about 30 seconds in, his eyes got wet, not crying but wet, the kind of wet that happens when something breaks that needed to break, and he wiped his face with a napkin and said, "This is what it feels like." What feels like? Sitting at a table while someone else is there. I forgot what it feels like. It feels like being in the room. At home I'm in the kitchen, but I'm not in the room. The room is the table. The table is where the family is. The counter is where I am. I've been 6 feet from my family every night for 13 months, and I've never been in the room. A Raleigh County deputy arrived. CPS caseworker Irene Stover arrived, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses and a legal pad who'd been doing child welfare for 20 years. She sat in the booth, the same booth, all of them still there, Nolan still sitting, and she listened. Then she went to the house. She came back an hour later. The table has 4 chairs. The counter by the microwave has a single plate, a single fork, and a single glass, set up, ready, like a place setting but standing height. There's a towel folded on the floor in front of the counter. The child uses it to stand on because his feet hurt. The mother confirmed the arrangement. She said, "Kent prefers it this way." When I asked if she'd considered getting a 5th chair, she said, "Kent says the table is balanced." When I asked what balanced means in the context of a family dinner, she didn't have an answer. I walked the house. The living room has a couch that seats 3 and a recliner. Kent sits in the recliner. His 2 children sit on the couch. The mother sits on the couch. Nolan sits on the floor or stands in the doorway. There is a 5th seat in the home, a folding chair in the garage. It's been there for at least a year, unused. When I asked the mother about it, she said, "That's for company." Her son is eating standing up at a counter, and there's a chair in the garage reserved for company. The stepfather, Kent Dillard, 38, was not home during the visit. The mother, Carla Creed, 34, was cooperative but defended the arrangement. She said Nolan doesn't mind. When I told her Nolan's back hurts from standing, she was quiet for about 10 seconds, and then she said, "He never told me that." I said, "He told a stranger at a restaurant before he told you. That should tell you something." Kent Dillard was interviewed that afternoon. He said, "It's a seating issue. The table seats 4. I'm not buying a bigger table for 1 kid." When the caseworker asked if he'd considered rotating who sits and who stands, he said, "My kids sit at the table. That's not negotiable. My kids. Not our kids. Not the kids. My kids sit. Her kid stands." The pronoun was the evidence. CPS opened a formal investigation. Kent was required to provide equal seating for all children in the home. Immediately, not eventually. A 5th chair was at the table by that evening. Not because Kent bought one. Because the deputy told him if there wasn't a chair at that table by 6 p.m., the next conversation would happen at the station. Carla called the caseworker the next morning. She said, "He put the chair at the table, but he won't look at Nolan during dinner. He talks to Bryce and Laney, and he talks to me, and he skips Nolan like he's not there." The caseworker said, "A chair is the beginning, not the end." Nolan sat at the table that first night. Chair number 5. Same food. Same plate. But at the table. He sat between his mom and Laney, and he ate his dinner, and he looked at the table, the surface of it, the wood, the scratches, the ring stain from a coffee cup, and he looked at it the way Marcus looked at the open pantry. Like it was something he'd been locked out of, and now he was in. Carla looked at him during that dinner. For the first time in 13 months, she looked at the counter. Empty now, no plate, no fork, no glass. And she looked at her son at the table, and whatever she saw made her set her fork down and not pick it back up. The Raleigh Ridge MC started a program called Fifth Chair, named for the chair that was always missing from Nolan's table. The program partnered with family counselors across Raleigh County to identify blended family households where stepchildren were being excluded, not through violence or starvation, but through architecture, through seating, through pronouns, through the 1,000 small decisions that tell a child they're a guest in their own home. The card read, "A child who eats standing up in a house full of chairs isn't choosing to stand. Count the seats. Count the kids. If the numbers don't match, someone's missing." 6 months later, Nolan was in 5th grade. He sat at the table every night. Kent was in court-mandated family counseling. The investigation had expanded beyond the chair into a pattern of differential treatment that included Nolan being excluded from family outings, his name not on the Christmas card, and his school events unattended by Kent, while Bryce's and Laney's events had Kent in the front row. The counselor said the chair was the symptom. The disease was that Kent had never accepted Nolan as part of the family, and Carla had never required him to. Carla and Kent separated in March. Carla said the chair was the line. Not the counseling, not the investigation, the chair. When I saw that counter with nothing on it, no plate, no fork, no glass, and I realized my son had been eating there for 13 months, and I'd been sitting 6 feet away pretending I couldn't see him. That was it. That was the moment. The counter was empty, and I could finally see what I'd been looking at the whole time. Nolan and Carla moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in Beckley. The apartment had a small kitchen with a table that seated 2 chairs, 1 for Carla, 1 for Nolan. Same as before Kent. Same 2 plates, 2 glasses, 2 forks. First dinner in the new apartment, Nolan set the table the way he used to. Across from each other, just like when he was 8. "Mom? Yeah? Can we eat slow tonight?" "We can eat as slow as you want." They ate for an hour, not because the food was big, because sitting was the meal. Webb drove past the Tudors one Saturday. The condiment counter was empty. Nobody eating standing up by the napkins. Just a counter with ketchup packets and a napkin dispenser and no plate. He went inside and ordered a biscuit and sat in the booth and ate it slow. Because he could. Be the one who pulls out a chair for a kid who forgot what sitting feels like. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that exclusion doesn't need a lock or a rule, sometimes it's just a missing chair, please share it. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels for more stories proving that the smallest act of cruelty is the one that happens at dinner every night in plain sight. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been the extra person in a house that wasn't built for you?